Hello. In this short presentation, I'm going to give you some tips on how to develop interesting and engaging project based learning modules in engineering. It's just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about, and it'll be really focused from two sides. It'll be focused from the student experience side and also the staff experience side as well. So whether you can improve your module outcomes or whether you can minimize the amount of admin load you have to undergo. So, who's this presentation for? This is for tutors, lecturers, or even teachers who want to develop or already are developing project based learning modules. I'm really focusing this around engineers, but of course, it can apply wider as well. And I've particularly focused this towards CDIO initiative, which is the conceive, design, implement, operate. Because this is the module where these tips came from. So it's really important to set the expectations for your students for the amount of time they're expected to spend working on these projects. Obviously, the quality of an outcome is usually proportional to the amount of time spent working on it. So, speak to your students and right at the beginning of the module, ask them how much time they're going to spend working. And obviously, get them to consider the amount of contact time in class that's scheduled, but also the amount of time outside of class where they're expected to work as well. Get them to work out how much time their entire team will be spending, and then interesting activities to get them to work out how much an average graduate gets paid per hour, and then work out the actual labour cost of the project they're conducting. This usually makes them think slightly differently and sometimes even behave slightly differently and more professionally when working on their projects. Contracts and rules are really important for setting expectations again. So, right at the beginning of the project, give students the opportunity to develop a set of rules of engagement, or even team contracts, you might call them, for how they're going to behave throughout the module within their teams. What's expected? What do you want to encourage? What do they not want to encourage? Give them some common examples on the right hand side that students usually have. A lot of these reside around communication, but just make sure the students develop these on their own. Make sure they agree at the end. And of course, you can use these later on if students don't engage or aren't abiding by the rules. As an academic, it's really important the approach that you take to grouping teams. So, if you have students from different courses available, make sure you mix students up between courses. This way, you can set a more interdisciplinary project, and there's definite opportunity there for more interesting outcomes. Another thing to consider is your progression. So, you might want to consider having an average academic achievement for each individual team. So, this might be things like average maths modules. What was the average mark? Can you make sure each team has the same average mark or approximately the same? And this is aimed at really stopping entire teams from failing. That will increase your progression rate. It generally makes you look better within the university. So, something definitely to consider. And of course, that means that students who might not achieve as well may end up achieving higher because they're around more able students. Again, just something really worth considering because it takes the hassle out of dealing with groups that are just falling apart. Marking criteria are really worth developing very deliberately with group projects. So make sure there's a large portion of the marks available for individual contribution for each student. Anywhere from maybe 40 to 50 or even higher, 60%. So it really puts the onus on the student to do the work in order to achieve the outcome. Of course, you don't want to do a lot of your time marking because project-based modules are really challenging to run. So you might want to use peer marking for this. Set the similar questions every week or every 2 weeks. Make sure students obviously rank one another or mark one another. And this also gives you a kind of handle on how students are behaving and engaging within their teams as well. Make sure you allow something in the marking criteria in the higher marks for exceptionality or originality, because this will really encourage those students who are looking to achieve top marks to really produce something interesting. And again, that's something they might show, for example, their graduate employers when going for interviews. So again, really important to allow that kind of room within the marking criteria. It's not an exaggeration to say a lot of students really dislike group work. And the reason they dislike it is because they're putting their outcomes in the hands of other students. So if you give them the power to remove students who aren't performing or who are effectively passengers within teams, there'll be a greater student satisfaction with your module. A typical scheme for applying to these modules is the yellow card, red card scheme, where you give students the opportunity to improve after they've been underperforming for a couple of weeks. Students can yellow card an underperforming student. They might be not abiding by the team contract. That serves as a warning, and after some additional notional amount of time, if they're still not up to expectations, they can be removed by the students from the team. So important to have the team contracts written well at the beginning. You may want to show examples, but again, do give them that flexibility to develop it themselves. Project topics, they need to be relevant, they need to be interesting. Again, they need to be course relevant. So a few things you could do, of course, is engage local companies and ask for any projects. Companies always have things they want doing, but never really have the opportunity to apply resource to. So, worth engaging local companies for this kind of activity. There's always simple activities available. You might also want to consider things like Engineers Without Borders or the Biomimicry Challenge. And these organisations may take a small fee, and in return, they'll provide you with some materials to save you obviously developing your own and give you the opportunity to take your teams, put them into competitions, and of course, win cash. Students seem to love cash, so that's a very good motivating factor for them as well. So, hopefully, these tips have been somewhat helpful in helping you develop your modules. Really remember, it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter and developing engaging modules that aren't burdensome for the academics. And these really are an important element of student experience. Students need to learn how to work within teams, and the better these modules are developed, the better they will run. We all know that managing these team modules is incredibly complex and admin intensive. And like I've already said, if you take the time in advance, you will reduce staff workload and you will gain higher student satisfaction. Thanks for listening. Have an amazing day.